Is Diablo better than sex? You probably never think about the video games you play as a pleasurable release, but scientifically, what's going on in your brain when you get a sweet loot drop from a maimed boss and what happens when you have sex are actually really similar. A study in the scientific journal Nature proved that video games release dopamine. Apparently, they raise it about 100% in the brain, which is roughly the same amount as sex. I've been playing a lot of Diablo lately with the release of Season 4, and this got me thinking, is this weird feeling I get every time a boss explodes into a pile of loot actually giving me the same pleasure as sex? And is that really why people play this game and other loot-driven RPGs for thousands of hours? Can we just not get enough? Is it more about craving that feeling over and over again as dopamine surges through your brain? Or are we actually having fun? Or is it both? Dopamine's a neurotransmitter released into our brain when we engage in pleasurable activities and when we satisfy a craving of some kind. It's part of the brain's reward system to reinforce behavior of things that we find pleasure in. So it's the thing that makes us crave that second cookie, but it's not inherently a bad thing. Dopamine exists to help us stay motivated and focused, and to find rewarding experiences in life and learn from them. It can also sharpen our attention and memory. This is why it exists. So dopamine is a double-edged sword, reinforcing good pleasurable behavior and reinforcing bad pleasurable behavior, and everything in between. When we climb a mountain and get to the top of the peak and feel ecstatic about our success, dopamine kicks in and makes us want to do it again and achieve great things. But it also kicks in when we do drugs or eat a 2,000-calorie slice of cake. Give me that cake! Dopamine doesn't discriminate. That brings us back to Diablo, a game where the loot drop system is everything. When you play Diablo, it's all about getting stronger and stronger and stronger, mostly through the gear you pick up by defeating enemies. You never know what enemies will drop what, so it's kind of like gambling, but without the risk. Just potential reward, which makes us keep coming back for more. Players keep playing because they never know when the next epic legendary item will appear. The unpredictability keeps dopamine flowing. That dopamine-driven desire for better loot fuels that just one more mentality. Players think, maybe the next enemy will drop that legendary item I want. This cycle of anticipation, reward, and craving keeps players engaged for hours on end. And then, as you achieve these legendary items that finally drop, kill elites and bosses, or continue to level up, the brain rewards this progress with a flood of dopamine every time. That satisfying ding sound when an item drops and the glittering animation around a rare item activates reward centers in your brain. So this begs the question, do we keep playing because it's fun, or do we keep playing because of the constant craving for more dopamine? I mean, we do call it grinding after all, right? But what is fun anyway? This is where it gets interesting, because a huge contributing factor to what we actually experience as fun is actually baked into the release of dopamine. Getting rewarded over and over again with the constant loot drops in Diablo continues releasing dopamine, not to mention the anticipation of the loot drops releases it as well. If we describe that experience, we describe it as fun because the pleasure comes in waves, and we like that. And along with that, we also get flooded with endorphins, adding a sense of euphoria, and serotonin, which influences our mood and our positive state of mind, and the flow state we often get into playing these games. If you've ever ripped through a hell tide and then had no idea where time went, you've experienced this. That roller coaster cycle of anticipation and release over and over again floods our brain with pleasurable neurotransmitters that keep us coming back. But of course, over time, our brain adapts to this and becomes less sensitive to the same stimulus over and over again. The sciencey term for this is downregulation. So your second 200 hours of Diablo is not going to feel like your first 100 hours unless the devs make things very, very fresh with very, very different rewards. This might have a lot to do with why players were so disappointed with the endgame at launch, claiming it was boring in the endgame and there wasn't enough to do, whereas the response from Blizzard was to continue to add new reward systems as you continued to climb the ladder, like the Paragon system unlocking at later levels, the Glyph system, and then Masterworking, Nightmare Dungeons, Uber bosses. Is that why Season 4 has been largely successful? Maybe. And I'm not here to bash Diablo or say that we're only doing it because we're trying to seek out some addiction. Not at all. I love this game. In fact, I made a whole video about why I love this game. I just want to understand why I love it and why I keep coming back and why so many people come back for way more than I do, for thousands of hours. So what about sex? Like Diablo, sex is all about anticipation and a reward for that anticipation that floods us with dopamine levels. And according to the study I mentioned earlier, which is from 1998, but last time I checked, human beings haven't evolved that much since 1998. Video games and dopamine release similar levels of dopamine in the brain. So, is Diablo better than sex? Well, do you play more Diablo than have sex? If you do, the answer might be yes.